It was at Toulon that my fame began. Those were the words of Napoleon Bonaparte about a battle that few people know, but one that changed the course of history. In 1793, France was collapsing. The revolution was consuming its own people. The king had been guillotined, and the reign of terror was sweeping across the country. To make things worse, one of the most strategically important cities in France opened its gates to the enemy without resistance, without a single shot fired. And it was in that chaos that an unknown young man of 24 years old was given his first chance. Toulon was located in the south of France, on the shores of the Mediterranean Sea, and it was the largest and most important French naval base in the region. 1/3 of France's entire war fleet was anchored there. Losing Toulon was not just losing a city, it was losing control of the Mediterranean. In August of 1793, the city joined a rebellion against the revolutionary government in Paris, and the rebels went further. They opened the port to the British Royal Navy, led by Admiral Lord Hood, aboard the HMS Victory. Spanish, Neapolitan, and Sardinian troops also landed ashore. In a single blow, without combat, the Allies had taken possession of the main French naval fortress in the south and dozens of warships along with it. Paris responded by sending around 19,000 soldiers to besiege the city and retake it, but there was a serious problem. Competent officers were in short supply. The revolution had expelled or guillotined much of the old military guard. The army had men, but almost no one capable of truly leading them. Before we continue, if you are not yet subscribed to the channel, please consider subscribing to support us. It is quick, it is free, and it helps the channel grow tremendously. The French army besieging Toulon was large on paper. Nearly 19,000 men positioned around the city at the start of the siege, with reinforcements arriving in the months that followed. But numbers alone do not win battles. The commander of those forces was General Jean-François Carteau, a loyal Republican, no doubt, but one who had been a court painter before the Revolution. With no real military training and no field experience, Carteau was the symbol of a problem rotting the French army from within. The Revolution had swept away the old aristocratic officer class, and in its place put men chosen for political loyalty, not military competence. To make things worse, the army's artillery officer, Colonel Daumartin, had been seriously wounded at the very start of operations. Artillery was the backbone of any siege. Without it, 19,000 men were nothing more than an armed crowd standing before well-defended walls. It was then that the name of a young Corsican officer came up as a replacement. Antoine Salicetti, a deputy of the National Convention in Paris and a longtime acquaintance of the young man, made the recommendation. The candidate was simply passing through Toulon on his way to another post when he was called upon. His name, Napoleon Bonaparte. He was 24 years old, technically skilled, but had never truly fought in battle. The Siege of Toulon would be his baptism of fire, and he knew he had to make the most of it. Upon taking command of the artillery, Bonaparte found a deplorable situation. Very few pieces available, 2 24-pound cannons, 2 16-pound cannons, 2 mortars, and scarce ammunition. It was impossible to attack a stronghold as well defended as Toulon with that, but Bonaparte was not thinking about attacking the walls. He was thinking differently. Bonaparte studied the terrain around Toulon with different eyes than those of Carteau. While the general saw a city to be attacked head-on, the young artillery officer saw something else, a port. And a port depends on its entrance? Toulon had an inner bay, called the Petite Rade, protected by 2 peninsulas that controlled access from the sea. Bonaparte realized that if French cannons could dominate that entrance, the Allied fleet would be forced to retreat, and without the fleet, Toulon could not be supplied or defended. The city would fall on its own without the need for a direct assault that would cost thousands of lives. The peninsula chosen was Le Caire. On the western side of the bay, it was poorly defended and held 2 key positions, Fort de l'Aiguillette and the Tour de Balaguer. Taking those 2 points would be enough to bring the Allied ships under direct fire. Bonaparte presented the plan. Carteau rejected it. The general did not understand or did not want to understand the logic behind the proposal. Even so, a partial occupation of the peninsula was carried out on September 21st, but without enough troops, the forts were not taken. And the British, upon recognizing the danger, reacted quickly. They reinforced the peninsula and built a new redoubt at its highest point, named Fort Mulgrave. What could have been swift became far more difficult. Bonaparte did not give up. He wrote directly to Carnot, the official responsible for military affairs in Paris, defending his plan and denouncing the amateurism of the command. Meanwhile, he began building and improving artillery positions around Le Caire, piece by piece, week after week. In October, he was promoted to major. The Siege of Toulon was far from over, but Bonaparte was just getting started. Carteau was finally removed from command in November, replaced by the newly promoted General François-Amédée D'Oppé. But D'Oppé did not last either. He held the post for only 10 days, between November 7th and 17th, equally unable to handle the complexity of the siege. It was then that General Jacques Dugommier arrived, an experienced and respected military man. The difference was immediate. On November 25th, Dugommier called a war council. Bonaparte's plan was presented, debated, and this time approved. Preparations for the attack on Fort Mulgrave began immediately. Meanwhile, the reinforcements that had been arriving over the months had raised the French troop strength to more than 32,000 men. Bonaparte, now with greater resources, had built 13 batteries with 63 artillery pieces aimed at the enemy positions. Fort Mulgrave was under serious threat for the first time. The date chosen for the attack was the night of December 17th, 1793. For 2 days, between the 15th and the 17th, French cannons bombarded the enemy positions without stop. But on the night of the assault, a storm fell over the region. The ground turned to mud, visibility dropped to nearly nothing. Dugommier and the political representatives proposed postponing the operation. Bonaparte disagreed. He argued that the bad weather was an ally, it would cover the advance of the troops and catch the defenders off guard. The attack was kept as planned. In the darkness and the rain, French soldiers advanced on the fort. There was confusion, there was hand-to-hand combat, there was chaos. But there was also courage. Dugommier himself entered the fight alongside his men. Bonaparte was also there in the middle of the battle, and he was wounded by a bayonet in the leg during the assault. By 3 a.m, Fort Mulgrave was in French hands. When the sun rose on the morning of December 18th, 1793, the French soldiers occupying the forts they had captured on the Le Caire Peninsula witnessed a scene that confirmed everything Bonaparte had predicted. The ships of the Allied fleet were beginning to abandon the port of Toulon. One by one, the British, Spanish, Neapolitan, and Sardinian vessels were leaving the bay. The plan had worked exactly as the young artillery officer had calculated. But the Allied withdrawal was not orderly. Before departing, the British did what they could to deny France the use of its own fleet. They set fire to 14 French warships anchored in the port and seized 15 others. It was a heavy blow, but it could have been far worse had the destruction operation not been partially frustrated by the speed of the French victory. The final numbers of the Siege of Toulon were heavy on both sides. The coalition forces lost around 4,000 men between killed and wounded throughout the entire campaign. The French lost approximately 2,000. It was not a cheap victory, but it was a decisive one. Toulon fell, and with it fell any doubt about who had been the architect of that conquest. General Dugommier was generous and honest in his dispatches to Paris, citing Bonaparte in a highly praiseworthy and detailed manner. Recognition came quickly. On December 21st, 1793, just 3 days after the retaking of the city, Major Napoleon Bonaparte was promoted to brigadier general, skipping 2 ranks at once. Lieutenant colonel and colonel, as if the army simply had no time to follow protocol in the face of such evident talent. He was 24 years old. and the world did not yet know what was coming. The Siege of Toulon lasted just over 3 months. In September, Bonaparte was an unknown young man passing through the city on his way to another post. By December, he was a general. But more than the promotion, Toulon revealed something that would define Napoleon's entire career. The ability to see what others could not, to think while everyone around him improvised, and to act with conviction when others hesitated. It was not luck, it was method. It was a plan drawn up with clarity, defended with persistence against superiors who did not understand it, and executed with courage to the point where Bonaparte was in the middle of the fighting when he was wounded. Toulon was not just his first victory, it was proof that he was different. In the years that followed, all of Europe would learn that the hard way. But it all started here in a port city in the south of France, on a stormy night with a young officer who refused to delay the attack. If you made it this far, thank you very much. Your presence and your interest are what keep this channel alive. If you are not yet subscribed, please consider subscribing. It is the simplest way to help us keep bringing stories like this one. See you in the next video.